Good morning, everybody. This is Lindy. Today I thought I haven't told a story for a while, so I thought I would tell the story of Sandy. Sandy came into my life when I was doing vintage clothing. And she had a large antique store in Napa. And I moved in and rented, excuse me, about a third of the store. We became great friends. I helped manage the store and run it. I was there every day if I wasn't working. Sandy was unique. Sandy came from a very wealthy family in Napa. When she was in her early 20s, she worked for a important doctor in San Francisco. And she married him, and he was in his 50s. And he died in his 60s, and she inherited quite a bit of money. Sandy bought, her family owns the oldest printing company in Napa, and they do most of the winery's labels. Now, this was 30 years ago. I don't even know if they're open anymore. And she came from money, and married money, and inherited money. She was always dressed to the hilt. Her hair always perfect. Her nails always perfect. She was always perfect. And her mother and father had bought land in a very exclusive area in Napa. Most people don't even know where it's at or how to get to it. It's up in the hills. You have to know where you're going to get there. And so her mother sold her some property at the top of the hill. Sandy had grandiose ideas. She built the biggest house she could, which was only 6,000 square feet, okay? But it had 2 stories, and it had servants' quarters. And she also built, at the bottom of the hill, 40,000 square foot barn. And the barn had 3 levels. And it had one of those lifts that you could be lifted up to the 3rd level. And it was full of antiques. And her house was a pathway from the front door to the family room and the kitchen. And most of the bedrooms were full. Not all. She was a hoarder. Of expensive stuff. Not the cheap stuff, guys. The expensive stuff. And Sandy was a buyer. Serious buyer. Now, you guys know who I am, right? So I don't have money to buy like Sandy. And Sandy just became my best friend, and she'd just take me everywhere, and we'd do all this, and I go, no, I can't afford that. And she'd go, oh, well, that's okay. You can pay me later. She got to the point where she would bring me stuff she knew I liked and drop it off at my house. It'd be worth a couple $1,000s. And I'd go, no, I don't want this. I can't afford it. No, it's okay. You can pay me. And so I was paying her forever. And one day, oh my goodness, guys, she did yoga. And I did too, but not to the extent she did. She had a yoga master, and anyway, he was selling these wooden shoes. They were leather on top, but they were wooden on the bottom. $300 each, right? So she takes me through. She says, oh, I just want to show you these shoes. I just want to show them to you. They're wonderful. And she wore them all the time for her feet. And they were marvelous for your feet and your body. They really were. They had these huge springs in between the wood. They were pretty marvelous shoes, but they were $300. Now, in the 90s, that's a lot of money for me, right? So she'd pull out pairs. She'd go, try this on. I go, oh, yeah, that's comfortable. Yes, yeah, that's pretty. Yeah, but I wasn't buying any because I didn't have $300 for a pair of shoes. So she gets several pair, and she's got all these boxes, and she loads them up, and she goes, okay, these 7 pair are for you. I've already paid him, so you can pay me back. $2,100 for shoes. $2,100 for shoes. In my entire life, I've never spent $2,100 for shoes. So I just didn't know how to stop her. I really, she was, she had good intentions, but her thought processes, she just didn't understand. I didn't have that kind of money. I didn't have that kind of money. She was like my own credit card. So, I would talk and say, you really need to stop doing this. So finally, she said, well, I want you to move in with us into the servants' quarters. And the servants' quarters was pretty nice, let me tell you. And she said, you could rent your mobile home out. I lived in a mobile home, mind you, a mobile home. And that'll give you extra money. And you don't have to pay rent here. You could just help me with the house. This house was huge. There were copper pans hanging from the kitchen. They just covered the ceiling. I mean, there were molds, jelly molds, fish molds, any kind of mold you could imagine from the old days, covered every wall space there was. I mean, the kitchen, everything was really, really overwhelming because there was so much of everything. But the servants' quarters was very nice, huge bedroom. I could put a TV in there. It was bigger than my mobile home. The bedroom was bigger than my mobile home, my whole mobile home. And I had my separate bath. And below me, she had a wine cellar. And she had stairs going down to the wine cellar. So they did have to come through the room when they wanted wine, which was fine with me. They didn't go in and get wine very often. So I decided, okay, we'll try this out. We'll try this out. So I did move in. I didn't rent my mobile home. I said, no, I'm going to wait to rent my mobile home. I don't know if I can live in a house like this because it was enormous. I was there maybe 3 months, and we were constantly down in the barn moving things, or constantly. We had one room, it was a pool room that we couldn't get into, and she had all these games, those stand-up games, like the basketball, what are they called? Oh, gosh. Oh, my goodness. Anyway, it'll come to me. So anyway, she had all these playing games that you could put in a quarter, and you could, pitch the ball or throw the ball up, or just all kinds of stuff like that. Pokemon games. I mean, just a whole room, and you could slide through the door, just barely get through the door, because the boxes were so high against the door. So we had to start on that room. And these games were like at carnivals and stuff like that. They just have one. Now they're video games, stand-up video games. You stand there and play them, but these were different. You know what I'm talking about, from the 50s and 60s. And then we had an earthquake. And the earthquake, it was very difficult to live there because you just had to move around things. And she did clear an area for me in the family room where I could sit, but mainly I stayed in my bedroom and watched TV when I could. Otherwise, I was always cleaning, always trying to move things, unbox things, get things ready for the store, be down at the barn. I never had any time off, and I knew this wasn't working. It's too fancy for me. It was getting to be a lot. So we had an earthquake, and there wasn't very much damage done. But within a month, I couldn't sleep in that bedroom. And I said to her, there's something wrong. And she said, what do you mean? What do you mean? I go, I can't breathe. I can't breathe. There's something wrong in this room. Did you check the wine cellar after the earthquake? And she goes, oh, no, I didn't. She went down there, black mold was creeping up the walls. And in my breathing, I'm allergic to black mold. So I know when there's black mold somewhere. So my breathing was really, really awful. I couldn't breathe. So she luckily, we were able to save the house because once it gets into the walls and the ventilation, it hadn't gotten into the ventilation. She had experts come out. It cost like $100,000 to clean up this. But she had a lot of unbroken bottles. And I sold them for her to a guy I knew who collected wine. So the whole cellar, she sold the whole cellar out. She didn't got that all taken care of. Everything was cleaned up. But at this point, I was ready to go home. And I said, I can't take it. This is too much for me. I need to go home. And I did. And I did get her to stop dropping stuff off. You know, I tried to make her understand that I was a poor person and I couldn't afford all of that stuff. But Sandy was very unique. And I kept saying to her, this is a fire hazard and you need to do something about this. And, oh no, Lindy, it'll be okay. I said, no, this is very dangerous. You're a hoarder. You need, if anything, move everything out of the house down to the barn. Well, I don't have room in the barn. You've got to move it down to the barn because this is really dangerous. And that was in the mid-90s. And then 1999, we were in this huge old store built in the 40s. We had a 50 or 100-year storm, rainstorm, and the the ceiling was flat. It flooded, and it all caved in on our store. Everything was destroyed. So that's another story for another time. But Sandy was unique, and I met a lot of important people in Napa through Sandy, or at least they thought they were important. I really never had anything to do with them. You know, I'd have a couple of dinners or whatever. But she was unique. In 2006, her house burned down. And I really hope she had insurance. She had some amazing antiques. Whatever she lost was amazing. But she was a true hoarder, and she just couldn't stop. So I thought you might enjoy that story, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Camel.